Since almost the beginning of cinema, filmmakers have attempted to depict the future. While of course they weren't necessarily meant as serious predictions, I think it's still fun to compare their version of the future with what really ended up happening. There appears to be a regularly consistent trend of movies overestimating technological advances, at least in some ways. One of the clearest examples is space travel and transportation. The film that defined space travel on the big screen for a generation, 2001: A Space Odyssey, depicted a future over 3 decades from its 1968 release date. In Stanley Kubrick's film, space travel is mundane and there's even a manned mission to Jupiter. In reality, we'll be lucky to have a man on Mars in the next few decades, and a mission to Jupiter feels impossibly far off. It's not shocking that Kubrick and co-writer Arthur C. Clarke were so optimistic, given that the film was made during the space race, when this kind of technology appeared to be advancing at a rapid rate. Humanity went from putting the first person in orbit in 1961 to landing on the moon only 8 years later, so it wasn't crazy to think that 30 years later, we might be exploring other planets. Released 14 years after A Space Odyssey, the original Blade Runner was set in 2019 and also vastly overestimated how quickly things would advance, as Earth has already colonized other planets. This is even more egregious than 2001, as it should have been obvious even in the early 80s that this wasn't happening anytime soon. There are also flying cars, a popular sci-fi staple audiences would see again a few years later with Back to the Future Part 2. According to that film, we should have had flying cars for over 3 years now. The film's writer and producer Bob Gale has stated that they knew this was completely unrealistic, but just thought it would be cool to see in a movie. The movie's director Robert Zemeckis said that he doesn't like films that try and predict the future, and that rather than trying to make a scientifically sound prediction that we were probably going to get wrong anyway, we figured, let's just make it funny. It does seem incredibly unlikely that we'll be using flying cars anytime soon, but Uber has unveiled a concept for a flying taxi. The seminal 1988 anime Akira was set in 2019, and its portrayal of transportation technology is pretty accurate. Kaneda's bike is a bit high-tech, but it and other motorcycles in the film appear to be fundamentally similar to those in reality. It's mentioned that it has electronically controlled anti-lock brakes, which is common in current vehicles. Automobiles, helicopters, and tanks all appear to be relatively normal, and space travel is not mentioned. Movies also frequently think way too highly of humanity's future advancement in robots and artificial intelligence. The aforementioned Blade Runner features androids that are as intelligent as a human and are able to pass as one unless given a lengthy test, something that's obviously quite far off. The original Terminator from 1984 posited a world where an extremely powerful and self-aware AI called Skynet basically controls much of the world and then decides to attack humanity in 1997. It goes without saying that we aren't even close to such an AI in 2019, much less in the 90s. The sequel, Terminator 2, is even more absurd in that it was made in 1991 and still has Skynet taking over in 1997. And not only are there robots that are capable of blending in as humans and shrugging off gunfire, in the second film they can shapeshift due to being made out of liquid metal. However, these films are kind of an exception in that the Skynet technology was based on the Terminator that went back in time in a sort of bootstrap paradox. So the fact that technology advanced quickly is actually a key plot point. The Westworld movie came out in 1973 and was set in 1983. It features an amusement park full of androids that are pretty much indistinguishable from humans. Clearly, looking back, this seems quite silly. In the 1995 anime Ghost in the Shell, humans can entirely replace their bodies and brains with cybernetic parts. While the film is set in 2029, which is of course a decade away, I think it's safe to say we won't be seeing this technology anywhere close to that year. I think with robots and AI, there's less of an excuse than with space travel, as it's not like there were massive advancements in the area going on in the 80s and 90s. One area where movies seem to often underestimate advancements is in communications and entertainment technology. Rarely, if ever, did films predict anything resembling the rise of the internet and smartphones. In 2001, they do have video calls, but people don't carry around personal devices. Haywood Floyd still has to go into a dedicated booth where he manually types in a phone number. Many works of science fiction predicted some form of video calling, which is reminiscent of Skype or FaceTime, but it never seems to work quite like it does in real life. Likewise, Blade Runner does have video phones, but again they are used in a dedicated phone booth. It's really not that shocking that so many movies predicted video phones, as they are just a combination of two previously existing technologies, whereas the internet was a whole new paradigm. Back to the Future Part 2 actually got quite a bit right when it comes to this kind of technology, despite the filmmakers' lack of concern with accuracy. Devices are voice activated, which is similar to Siri on iPhones or smart speakers like Amazon Alexa. Like 2001, there are video calls, but people still use fax machines that print out physical pieces of paper. Marty's children wear goggles that seem to be like some sort of virtual or augmented reality, and they also have qualities of smartphones. People also have the ability to pay for things with their fingerprint, which is definitely something that's been gaining traction in the real world. In the 1995 film Strange Days, there's a new form of entertainment where people can experience the recorded physical sensations of another person. Ridiculously, the movie is set only 4 years into the future in the year 1999. It does partly take place on the New Year's Eve before the new millennium, and while it certainly makes for a dramatic backdrop, it's hardly essential to the story. Futuristic weaponry in science fiction is a bit of a mixed bag. Blade Runner feels accurate in that its version of 2019, people still use low-tech guns that aren't too far off from what people use in real life. However, in the Terminator films, the scenes set in the future do feature laser guns. In Akira, there are energy weapons like Kaneda's battery-powered heavy laser rifle, but they seem to be relatively rare. We see real-life weapons used for most of the film, like micro Uzis and the Colonel's Desert Eagle. This is a world where World War III happened, so it makes sense that more effort was put into creating advanced weapons. That could also explain the Satellite Orbital Laser, a weapons platform that fires on Tetsuo from space. When it comes to stuff like this, filmmakers may have been unconcerned with potential realism. They might have just wanted weapons that looked cool, and to be honest, I can hardly blame them. Of course, it's ridiculous to expect filmmakers to accurately predict the future all the time, and they often aren't even trying, but our visions of the future still reflect our anxieties and hopes in a very interesting way. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe.